Okay, so we are going to be painting. Here's our reference photo for today. Big reveal. This is a landscape from the Pacific Northwest. Last week I was back in Seattle with my parents, and we went to visit Olympic National Park, and it was so beautiful, so much fun. Mom's watching, so Mom, wasn't that so much fun? And this is at Crescent Lake Crescent, and so just like an absolutely beautiful kind of alpine lake, and just some gorgeous views. So this is a really fun little landscape. I really like the composition here with this sort of mirroring shape here, and then some background land there. So this is a really fun composition with kind of the mirror image shapes. And we are going to go through and paint this together. Like I was saying, so much fun. Yes, that's right, Mom. Like I was saying before, we are just painting off of a reference photo today. I have not painted this yet. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I kind of break down a reference photo and how I put it into painting form, and kind of what elements I might ignore from the reference photo and what elements I might kind of key in on and make sure are included in my painting. So it could be a little bit more of like I might have some indecision out loud while we're painting, but that's kind of part of it. And hopefully it's helpful for you to kind of hear that process. So feel free to screenshot this as it's up here. I'll leave it up for another 10 seconds or so. If you'd like to have access to the reference photo, you're welcome to use it. I will be showing it back again several times throughout the live, but if you want access to it, then you can have it. So go ahead and screenshot if you want to. And then I'm going to go over my materials, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, here we go. Again, that'll be back throughout the live. You'll see it again. So don't worry, I just need to have some room on here for my actual painting. So my paper is this Fluid 100 brand, 100% cotton watercolor paper. It is 6 by 8 inches, 140 pounds. And this is what's called a watercolor block. If you've never seen these before, the stack of paper is bound on the long sides here. So there's glue here holding these pages together. And on the short sides, it is not bound. So what this means is that it holds the paper down as you're painting, and then when you're done, you can kind of break the glue seal on the sides, and then you have your piece of paper. And it just means I don't have to tape my paper down, which is kind of nice, and I can paint all the way to the edges of the paper. So it's just a kind of a personal preference. I like to use it for these painting lessons, but for sketchbooks and stuff, I prefer to use loose paper. My watercolor paints are Winsor&Newton, as per usual. These are professional watercolor paints. You do not have to use professional watercolor paints. Whatever you have will be totally fine. I did kind of curate the colors that are in this palette here based on what I like to use in my paintings. So this is kind of a custom, I guess, set. I just buy these paints individually. So you can do that as well, or you can get one of their kind of pre-made sets. And then finally, my brushes are Princeton Neptune for the most part. I'll probably use these two, and then my detail brush, which is from Christy Rice. So these are Princeton Neptune. This is a 10 round and a 4 round. And then my detail brush will be a 2 round from Christy Rice's, she's a TikToker, Happy Painting set. So that's probably what I'll use. Again, whatever materials you have is totally fine. I do have all of these and all of the art supplies that I use and would recommend in my Amazon storefront, which is linked to my bio, so if you want to check that out, you can. Okay, let me grab a pencil here. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the sketch. So I'm going to move, first what we're going to do is with your watercolor paints, especially if you're working with dry watercolors, what you're going to do is activate your paints first. So I'm going to take my brush and just put a little drop of water into each of my watercolor pans. This is called activating the paints. It just lets them start to dissolve in this water here, and it just makes it so much easier to paint with them later. So go ahead and do that. You can also use a spray bottle if you're fancy, but I've always just used my paintbrush. No need for extra supplies when you don't need them. Okay, so I'm gonna put that off to the side so we can get the reference photo back, but that's just kind of dissolving in there. Okay, so there's our reference photo. Here's our paper. Now we're going to figure out our kind of sketch for this painting. So we have 3 main sections in this painting. We've got this piece of land here, we've got the background piece of land there, and then we've got this piece of land here. And then the empty space, or the negative space, is the sky and the water. And so those shapes will come from us drawing these positive shapes here. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of figure out where I want the horizon line to be, because this is pretty much a straight line across. So that's going to be about a quarter of the way up the paper. So I'm just going to start right here and draw a relatively straight horizontal line across. And you do want to use a light touch here. I'll probably use a slightly heavier touch than I normally will so that the pencil marks will show on camera. But you do want to use a very light touch with your pencil. Yes, these lives get uploaded later to my YouTube channel. So don't worry if you can't make it through the whole thing, or if you just want to try it again later, you totally can. Okay, so we've got our horizon line there, about a quarter of the way up the paper. Next, I'm going to draw this piece of land here, and I'm going to notice where it ends, which is a little bit less than halfway across the paper. Whoop. So if we divide this painting or this photo kind of in half this way, this land piece ends just a little bit before halfway. So I can use that and say like, okay, here's about halfway across my paper. So then this piece of land is going to end right about here. And then I can just kind of draw it up from there. You don't have to match that shape exactly. I'm just going to kind of roughly draw in this hill shape there. So that's what that looks like right now. Okay, and then I'm going to draw this one on this side. I'm not going to draw the trees right now. We're just going to kind of draw a general kind of wavy line for where those are going to go. And again, this ends, if this is halfway-ish right here, it ends a little bit more towards the right than this ends toward the left. So I'm going to go a little bit further this way. And just kind of draw a wavy line going up here lightly. Yeah. Okay. So that's the top of that. And then in between those two, we can draw this land here, which takes up about a third, maybe a little bit more than a third of the sky section. So if I mark this out with my fingers, it's going to go up to about here. Again, just kind of wavy line. Doesn't need to be perfect and does not need to match the reference photo exactly. Okay. And then the last little detail we need to do is this beach. So what's going to happen here is this curvy line that we made here on the right is actually going to come down a little bit further. We're going to bring it down just a little bit below the horizon line. Bring it back a little bit towards the right here. I'll zoom this in here. So we brought it down a little bit underneath the horizon line, back a little bit towards the right. Then we're going to add the beach, so that's going to be another little line out to the left. And then we're going to curve that back around to the right here. Something like that. Okay. And that should give us our kind of general sketch. Now, you can leave the pencil sketch as is, or you can take an eraser and lightly erase the lines you don't need anymore. So the horizon line underneath this section on the right, I think that's all. And then you can also lightly, with an eraser, kind of erase a little bit of the lines here. If you had a more heavy hand, you can just use this to lighten the lines up. So you can still see them, but they won't show up so strongly in the final painting. So I'm going to erase mine just a little bit, so you probably can't see them anymore, but if I zoom in, you can still see that they're there. They're just much more faint. Okay. So there's our pencil sketch. I'll give you a second to finish that up. I'm going to leave this here for just a second while I do my little spiel. This is going to be about an hour-long lesson, maybe a little bit more since we're kind of working through this together. This is always just for fun, as usual. Please don't put too much pressure on yourself, especially if you're new to watercolor. It does not need to be a perfect painting. Hopefully this is just some practice for you and just like a fun little thing for you to do on a Saturday afternoon. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just kind of enjoy the process. Be nice to yourself. Be nice to everybody in the comments. Be nice to me. And we will all have a good time. All right. And then as usual, this paint and sip is being recorded. Your comments are not recorded, just my voice and what's going on the painting here. And the recording will be uploaded to my YouTube channel, which is linked in my bio. It is also just Hannah MP, so you can find me on YouTube there. And all the previous paint and sips are up there too, and this one will go up there later. My YouTube is also linked in my bio, so if you click on the little link tree in there, you can just find it. It's the first little symbol that you see when the link tree pops up. Okay. Can you make a tutorial on how to remove the paper when finished? I will do it at the end here, but just kind of generally, what I use is a palette knife. You could also just use a butter knife, and you slide the palette knife in between the paper that you painted on and the rest of them, and then you use that to break the glue. But again, I will show that at the end of the painting as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started so that we don't go over our allotted time too much. The first thing we're going to do is fill in the sky, and then we're going to fill in the water section, and then we'll kind of paint the land areas on top of that. So we're going to start with the sky section. We need two colors. We need a sky blue. I like to use ultramarine blue for my skies, but whatever color that you have in your palette that reminds you of a nice sky blue is going to work perfectly fine. So just go ahead and get some of that onto your palette here, warmed up. Don't add too much water yet because we are going to be watering this down a little bit. So there's my sky blue, ultramarine blue. When did you start painting with watercolors? I think when I was just a young kid. I've just been painting for a long time. Okay, second color is going to be gray. If you just have black in your palette, that's fine. I use Payne's gray, which is kind of a cool toned gray, almost blue. But you could mix black and blue together to make a similar color. Yeah, the comment section you can get rid of. You either hold down on the screen or swipe one way or the other. You guys will have to figure that out on your own. Sometimes it's different with different phones. I do these lessons usually every other week at the same time. Yes, on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Usually every other week, as long as everything's going smoothly in my life. All right, where'd you get this watercolor from? I got it from my local art store. Blick, who's one of the art stores that I use. I just order online, and then Plaza is the one that kind of serves the Midwest. Okay, so for this sky section, I'm going to take my brush, and what I'm going to do is put a whole layer of water in the top section of this sky here. I'm going to overlap the kind of pencil lines that we made for the land sections. It does not need to be perfect. You can just kind of overlap it a little bit, and then we're going to drop those colors in. So this is what's called a wet on wet technique because we're painting into wet paper and it kind of allows the colors to spread around. However, you do need to do these steps kind of in quick succession. You can't pause too much because when the paint dries, you have lost your window. So I'm going to talk through this whole step. I will not have too much time to pause, but I will try and talk through it as clearly as possible. You're welcome to watch me and I will give you some time to catch up afterwards. Okay. So I'm going to take my paintbrush and just put a nice layer of water over the sky section. Again, overlapping my pencil marks from before by like an inch or so. We're going to paint over that later, so it does not need to be exact. And you can tilt your head, make sure you're not missing any sections. See the light reflecting off of the water there, so that you're not missing anywhere. Okay, and then we're going to start with our sky blue. Just go straight into it and just start dotting it in some different little areas here. I'm just doing some little streaks up here at the top. You can do just some kind of dots. Just do a few of these, kind of floating around in there. Okay, don't overdo it. We want more gray than blue. So just a little bit of blue and then go into your gray paint and start dotting that in as well. And you want to make sure you leave a few sections where it's just the white of the paper, not covering the whole thing with paint yet. Okay, so there's that. I've left a few white sections and I've got my gray and blue kind of muddled in there. Now I'm going to pick up my paper and tilt it in different directions, and you can see that this makes the paint kind of spread in those directions with gravity. If you're not able to pick your paper up off the table, you can use a damp brush to do this same thing to kind of blend everything together. But I feel like the picking up and tilting it is really what helps to blend it all together really softly. So I'm just going to kind of tilt this in slow circles back and forth. You can leave it tilted in one direction if you really want the paint to kind of go that way. So that's kind of up to you. And when you're happy with how it's blended together, you can just set it flat and it will stop blending. So I'm pretty happy with that. I do want some still, you know, some distinctions. And then our last step here is I'm going to take a slightly smaller brush and I'm going to make sure it's completely dry. And I'm just going to use that to pick up some of the pigment here and create some cloud highlights. So I'm going to continually dry off the brush here and just kind of use the side and dot it into the paper. And because the paint is still wet, it gets kind of brought up into the bristles of the brush and off of the paper. So I kind of just go with what shapes have been created already on my paper. I kind of stick to the areas that were already kind of lighter and just kind of emphasize those cloud shapes with my brush. Feel free to kind of use different brush strokes. You can drag your brush or you can tap it. Tapping it will create this more fluffy cloud shapes, and then dragging it will create these more streaky cloud shapes like this. Both are good. It's good to mix in both. And when your paper starts to dry, that's kind of it. That's how much you can do. And I can tell my paper's starting to get pretty dry, so I'm not going to be able to pick any more up off of here pretty soon. So you're just going to have to be okay with it. And that's what it's going to be. Okay. This is my favorite way to make kind of a partly cloudy sky. I feel like once it's kind of, once you've kind of done this, it really looks pretty realistic. Okay, so go ahead and do that if you haven't already. I will talk you through those steps one more time just in case you missed anything. So we did a layer of water throughout the whole kind of top section of this paper. Then you went in with your blue, the sky blue, put that in a couple places using some little dots and dashes. Then you did the same thing with the gray paint, put that in there, leaving a little bit of white space. Then you picked up your paper, tilted it in different directions until it's blended, however you want it to be. And then you can use a completely dry brush to pick up any extra pigment and create these kind of more defined cloud shapes. Okay, so go ahead and do that. I'll give you a minute or two to kind of finish that up. And feel free to let me know in the comments when you're done so that I know when we can kind of move on. Let me answer some questions here. Can you make more painting videos with gouache? Yeah, like someone said, those are on my Patreon. For these, I just do watercolor because it's kind of a more common art supply that people will have. Yes, it was ultramarine blue and Payne's gray. Yes, this will be uploaded to my YouTube later today. How can I understand that I add enough water? That's kind of more of a practice thing. Like you'll just kind of understand how much water to add as you work on watercolor. It's hard for me to tell you exactly how much. So you just kind of have to practice. Anybody have a supply list? Yeah, so I have a Amazon storefront in my link tree. So if you want my art supply recommendations, you can find them there. What option is this? This was number 3, which is my Hannah's surprise. Okay, I think that's everybody's questions. Feel free to ask questions that you have in the comments. I'm happy to answer them in the times where we're kind of waiting for people to catch up. Remember to sip on what you're sipping on. I love you so much. Thank you so much. Sky is ready. Okay, it doesn't have to be dry. It just has to be, you just have to be done painting on it. Just so you know. What brand of watercolor do you use? It is Winsor&Newton. The brand is Winsor&Newton. Okay, I rarely add shadows to clouds, but I really love how it looks. Definitely going to try it. Yeah, absolutely. I really like the light gray. I don't like to add really dark shadows to my clouds because it lets everything else kind of in the foreground stand out a little bit better. So I really like the kind of light gray that happens in there. I think that looks really nice. Do not drink the watercolor water. Exactly. Yeah, I've got my sparkling water here. Set to the side. All right. Let's go ahead and get started on the water section here. So finish up whatever you're doing with the clouds, and we are going to go ahead and get started with the water. So what we're going to do in terms of paint for the water section is mix together the sky color, the 2 sky colors that we just used. So I'm going to mix together this ultramarine blue and the Payne's gray that I just used, just kind of together in this palette here. So you're going to come up with kind of a bluish gray. look like this. Just kind of a mixture of those two colors. And we're going to keep, so this is a pretty concentrated color that I have in here. You can see it's not super dark, but it's pretty vibrant here. So what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of this paint on my brush, move it over to a separate pan, and then add some more water. And this is how I can make a lighter version of the same color. So now I've added some water. It looks like that. So I've made two separate paints with that one color. Okay. Just making sure we've caught up on comments here. White brush line looks like an airplane went by. Yeah, maybe right there. Kind of does. Okay, awesome. So once you've got those two colors, the darker version and the lighter version, we are going to start with the lighter version, and we are going to do a technique called dry brushing. And we talked about this a little bit last week because we also did water in our painting last week, but I will explain it again. So what you're going to do is get some paint on your paintbrush. I'm using a larger brush. I scraped off a lot of the paint here back into the palette here. So I have some on my brush, but it's not very loaded up. You can also just kind of touch it to a paper towel because you want some paint on your brush, but just not a ton. And then what you're going to do is hold your brush almost sideways to the paper and just lightly scrape it across the paper here. And you'll get this texture where the paint is breaking over the texture of the watercolor paper. So you can see there, that's the dry brushing texture. So that's what we're going for. This is a really great technique for painting water. And so that's what we're going to do, starting with the lighter color, and then we're going to move into the darker color. All right. So again, I'm loading up my brush, scraping off some of that paint back into the palette there. You can touch it with a paper towel as well. And then I'm going to hold it pretty parallel to the paper here and just lightly scrape it across the paper here. Since this is a lighter color, it's okay if you have a little bit more coverage. And eventually it should start breaking and creating that kind of water texture. And you just want to use as horizontal of brush strokes as you can possibly manage. Nothing will kind of break the illusion of water like non-horizontal brush strokes. So that's kind of one pass there. This paint dries pretty quickly, and so I only have to wait a minute or two, and then I can just use the same color and do it again. And it will start kind of building on itself and just creating a slightly darker color, and you'll just get these kind of highlights here. The painting, or the reference photo, does not have super bright highlights. We just have some water texture, so don't feel like you have to leave a ton of white paper showing through. We just want to kind of add a little bit of texture with this color here. Okay. I'm going to let that dry for a second. Hopefully this is making sense. What colors did you mix? So this one is Payne's Gray and Ultramarine Blue mixed together. It's the two sky colors that we used mixed together to create the water reflection. Okay, so once that's had a chance to dry for just a minute or two, you can switch to your darker color, and we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to just be a little bit more sparing about it. So I'm going to really unload some of this paint onto my paper towel, so I just don't have very much on there. And then if you can see here, we're kind of separating the colors in the water. So we've just filled in kind of the lightest color that you can see in here. This darker blue that we're going to put in is just this kind of darker section over here and this kind of darker section here, and a little bit of texture kind of in the middle here. This really dark section we're going to fill in later, so don't feel like you have to put a bunch of dark blue right below the beach. This is we're going to do later with a green color that we're going to mix with the trees. So right now with this darker blue, we're going to focus it kind of in this area here and kind of in the distance here in the middle, and just a touch in the center. Okay, so just be more sparing with the darker blue. So here we go, holding my brush pretty parallel to the paper, scraping, 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 Adding some back here, and then just a little bit in the middle here. You can even use the point of your brush in the middle here just to give you some more defined kind of horizontal ripples. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. It's really tempting to kind of keep going, but I'm going to leave that there for now. You can always add more. It's really hard to take it away, so be sparing there. Can you start over? No, sorry, I will not be starting over. This lesson will be uploaded to my YouTube channel later today, so if you have missed it or you're just kind of joining now, you can go to my YouTube channel. This whole live will be uploaded there later today, so you can follow it yourself. Okay, and we're already up to 15,000 likes, which is really cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So I'm going to give you a minute to finish that up. I'm going to clean my palette, and then we're going to get started with our next sections here. So let me know how you're doing in the comments if you're painting along with me. Let me know how this is going. Sounds good. Thank you so much. And this is actually probably a good time for me to do my little shameless plug since you're all here. So finish up what you're doing. You can clean your palette off. My name is Hannah, if you have not joined me before. Hello. I am a full-time artist, and I do these paint and sips here on TikTok. This is my 98th paint and sip, which is really exciting. We're going to have our 100th sometime in September, which is very cool. I am a full-time artist, like I said, and so that means I rely on lovely people like you to support me in several different ways. So if you would like to do that, if you're enjoying this lesson and you'd like to figure out how to support me, the best way is to go to my bio and click on that link tree that you see there. Once you open that, you'll see these 5 symbols at the top. And I'm going to explain to you what they mean. So the first symbol here is YouTube. So if you click on that, it'll take you right to my YouTube channel. Again, this live and the other ones that I've done before are uploaded to my YouTube channel. So you can watch them there. You can kind of follow along with them at your own pace. The next symbol there is like the $sign. This takes you to my PayPal. I used to have a tip jar app on Linktree and they took that away. So if you'd like to leave me a tip or a gift for these live sessions, that is always super, super appreciated. You can do that via that little $sign there and it'll take you to PayPal, and that's a great way to do that. Again, that is always super, super appreciated. The next symbol is my email in case you need to get a hold of me. And then I have my TikTok and Instagram linked there too if you need to find those socials. If you scroll down in that link tree, you'll find some other links there. The first one is a link to my book, which people are already talking about, my book, which is Watercolor Wanderlust. This book came out in April, which is really exciting. I'm an author. That's my name right there. And this book has 24 watercolor lessons for you that are basically just like these paint and sips. So if you enjoy these paint and sips, you'll like the book. It's basically just all written out for you to paint these different landscapes. And you can follow it at your own pace, which is really fun. So if you'd like to support me that way, the top link in my link tree will take you to all the different options that you have in terms of purchasing the book. That is always super helpful. This is going to be a great holiday gift for anybody as well. It's never too early to start thinking about that. And yeah, I just appreciate everybody who has already supported the book and purchased it, and people seem to like it. So I appreciate that. And yeah, so make sure you check out the book. The next link you'll see in there is my Etsy shop. So that's where I sell all of the paintings that I make. I've got originals in there, I've got prints, I've got postcards, bookmarks, all of that good stuff. This is one that I've just recently done. It's a painting of rocks underwater with the sun kind of shining through. I've got the painting up here sitting next to me. And this one is my favorite painting that I've ever done. It took me 8 months, and I'm just very proud of it. So if you'd like a print or the original, those are available in my Etsy shop along with all of the other paintings that I make. So make sure you check that out too. And the last thing I'll talk about in there is my Patreon, which someone mentioned. If you'd like to support me on a monthly basis, you can check out my Patreon. There are different tiers in there, so you can kind of support me with whatever you like. So the cheapest one is $3.50, so a 2004 cup of coffee. And you get a free tutorial every month that is not accessible anywhere else. And then for a 2024 cup of coffee, so $10, you can get the tutorial as well, plus a art print, an exclusive art print every month, and then the tiers go up from there with some other bonuses, so you can check those out too. So whatever way you choose to support me is always super, super appreciated. I appreciate you guys coming to these lives. Even if you can't support me financially yet, just liking my stuff on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, like just playing my videos, all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, helping me with the algorithm is always very helpful. So thank you again for anybody who has supported me, and you're just helping me live in my dream to be an artist. So I really appreciate it. So thank you for bearing with me through my shameless plugs there. We are going to go ahead and move on. So next we're going to start painting the land sections. I always like to go back to front. So the one in the middle here is the one furthest back, and then we're going to go with the one on the left and then the one on the right. So we're going to kind of go in that order. The color that we need to mix now is kind of a blue-green color. So I'm going to mix together ultramarine blue here. I've clicked the like 100 times. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So I'm going to get some ultramarine blue and then mix together some sap green in there. So ultramarine blue, sap green, and then I'm going to do a little bit of burnt sienna, which is kind of a orange color, and that's just to kind of dull it down a little bit. So when we're painting things that are far away, we want to desaturate the colors that we're using, which means we need to add the opposite color on the color wheel. If you're not following, don't worry, it's you'll figure that out as you paint. But kind of the opposite of blue is orange, and burnt sienna is the kind of an orange color. So it just kind of desaturates this color that we're using, makes it look further in the distance. So let's see. I think that needs to be more blue. I really like to swatch my colors before I put them on the paper because it just shows me what they're going to look like. It's hard to tell what they look like in the pan here. Okay, that's better. I like that better. So you can see that was my first attempt. I just added more blue, and that's my second attempt there. I have a problem with my palette. It's beading. Beading. It might be beading. So if it's new, that often happens. The beading will wear down as you kind of use the palette, and then the paint will spread out like this. I'm using ultramarine blue. I really love your watercolor paints. Mind telling me where you bought them? I bought them from Blick. This is Winsor&Newton. It's a very common brand. You can find it at any art store, really. They are professional watercolor paints. They're even available on Amazon, on my Amazon storefront in my bio if you're interested. Just buy your watercolor paints. I'm excited. Yay, good. I'm so glad. I really like that palette. Okay, so with your blue color here, just add a little bit of water here so that it's not too saturated. And whenever you're ready, we're just going to fill in this distant land piece with a flat wash here. So I'm going to carve out the shape. So I'm not going to paint over the land sections that are kind of in front. We're going to make kind of an interesting skyline here. So just kind of wiggle your brush a little bit to give it some texture. And then just fill it in all the way down to the horizon line. So this is kind of an example of something that I'm changing from the reference photo, just a little bit, or it's kind of something that I'm omitting. So in the reference photo, you can see in the distance, there is some tree texture here, especially if you zoom in. You can see that there's individual trees in this distance section. But if I were to try and add all of those individual trees, it would really kind of pull focus from the main focal point of this painting, which are these sections of land that are closest to us, where we can actually see kind of the individual trees here. So we're going to just stick with a flat wash for this distant land here instead of adding that tree detail, just so that the painting doesn't get too busy. So that is something that I kind of look for in a reference photo and make sure that I'm not over busying the painting with too many details here. How do you get such a big puddle of color? Lots and lots of water. Yeah, so you kind of alternate between paint and water. So if I'm trying to get like a big pile of paint and I just kind of go once into my palette here, I'm only gonna get this much, right? So then I go into my water, I add some water, then I go back into my paint and I add some paint. Then I go back into my water and I add some water. Then I go back to my paint and add some paint. So you just kind of alternate between water and paint, and then you end up with a nice amount of paint. That granulation, I know, the granulation only happens really on this paper. I'm not entirely sure why. And only with a few colors, only with specific colors, usually with the blue. But it's kind of cool, like I like that texture there. Just ordered the book, I really like your content. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start mixing up our color for the next section here, which is this, the land section on the left. This is going to be a dark green. So, I've already got my green there, that's perfect. So into our sap green, so sorry for the motorcycle outside. Into our sap green, we are going to add some blue. I like to use ultramarine blue. And you can see how that just automatically makes it like a darker green. And I'm gonna add some brown as well. This will darken it and also just kind of neutralize it, and it'll look like more of an evergreen color. And you can kind of just go back and forth between those colors until you get a dark green that you're happy with. Don't add too much water at this point. Once you've kind of got the amount of paint that you need, don't add any more water. And you'll get a nice dark green like this. Okay, so whenever you're ready with that dark green, again, I'm using a smaller brush. What we're going to do is create a little bit of tree texture in this section. So I'm going to zoom you in a little bit. It was, the brown I use is called Van Dyke brown, but it does not matter what brown you use. So I'm kind of flattening out, let's see if I can kind of show you what I'm doing. I'm kind of flattening out my brush here, so I'm not twisting it. I'm just kind of squishing it into the paint here and then picking it up. And you'll see I get kind of a flat edge and then a wide edge. So I'm going to end up using that kind of flat edge that I get to make this tree texture. So squishing it into the paint and then picking it up, and you should get kind of a flat edge there. Then when I go to my paper, I can use that flat edge on the top section, or the top part of this land section here, and I'm just going to use vertical strokes, and I can get these really thin paint strokes here. And I'm just going to use these to create a sort of tree-lined ridge. So you want to really try and change up the altitude that you're using here. And layer them over the top of each other. And you can just kind of create this tree line here, working our way all the way down. And as long as this section is mostly dry, you can overlap it. If it's not, just give it a second. And I'm just overlapping that distant section of land there just a little bit with the tops of these trees. Then once we get here, we can just kind of bring this down to meet the water. There, so you can see I've created kind of the ridge line there. Then we're going to use this same color and just kind of add some trees within this section here. So I'm just going to start adding, I'm pressing down a little harder to create slightly larger triangle shapes here. And what we're going to do is just layer these on top of each other, and that will create some tree shapes. So I'm just going to do a few sections at a time. It's going to look really weird at first. I promise it'll work out. So again, just kind of pressing down, creating these little triangle shapes. And I'm just kind of doing this at random. Now, as these little trees dry, you can go over the top of them with more of these tree shapes, and it will just kind of look like a forest filled with trees. So now I'm just starting to overlap. Again, I have not changed the color. The darker colors come from just overlapping the same color twice. Okay, as we get down to the bottom, I need to mix a little bit more of this color here. I will just let you look at that while it's in the ugly stage. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going. And as we get down to the bottom here, that's when you can just kind of use a thin line to figure out where this meets the water down here. And then just keep adding those trees on top of it. The paint dries so fast on the paper for you. Does that depend on the paper? Sometimes it depends on the paper. Mostly depends on the humidity and heat of the area that you're in. And I'm in Cincinnati. It's 85 degrees in this studio right now. So it's just drying really fast because it's hot in here. And it's not so humid. Well, it is humid today, but it's mostly just hot. What brush are you using, please? This is a Princeton Neptune 4-round. I love these Princeton Neptune brushes. These are my favorite brushes. They last you for literal years, and they don't lose hair, or they don't lose bristles, and they hold their shape for like years, as long as you take like just even mediocre care of them. What's your YouTube channel so I can go back and try this later? It is linked in my bio, so if you click on the link tree, there is a little YouTube symbol right underneath the little description in the link tree, and that will take you right to it. It's also just Hannah MP Art and Prints, or just Hannah MP. You should be able to find it with that. Subscribe while you're there. That would be very nice, very helpful. I missed the beginning of this, but it looks fun. How often do you go live like this? I do these every other weekend usually. So the next one will be in 2 weeks. Always at the same time, always Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern time, unless stated otherwise. And I always put the announcement on TikTok the Thursday before. So if you are wondering whether there's a live paint and sip there, you just have to check my TikTok on Thursday, and you'll see whether I'm hosting one or not. Okay, that's pretty good texture there, so you can hopefully see that kind of looks like a forest without adding too much detail, because again, we are adding kind of more and more detail as we get to the front, and this is kind of the foreground here, so we're not going to add too much detail here, but it does look like trees. Just subscribe, thank you so much, I appreciate it. I'm almost monetized on YouTube. I'm so close. I'm trying to get a backup plan for if TikTok ends up getting banned in the US. So make sure you follow me on Instagram and YouTube, just in case. Okay, how's everybody doing? We are at, it is 3:51. We are going to end up going over by a little bit, so I apologize. Hopefully it's worth your while. Okay, so we've got this done. We just have one more section left, so it shouldn't take us too long. Let's get our reference photo back up here. So, let's see. Okay. So what I'm kind of, I'll try and talk through my thought process here for the next section. So we've got a few elements in this next section that we need to talk about. We have these trees up here, which are kind of, I would say, the focal point of this painting, which is these tall trees kind of standing up in the distance here. And it's kind of a line of trees that goes down. So I'd say that's kind of the focal point, these kind of lovely trees. And then we've got these lighter trees in the foreground, which could be a little tricky. And then we've got the beach, and then we've got the water reflection down here of the trees. So what I think we're gonna do is paint the beach first. Then we're gonna paint the light trees. Then we're going to paint the dark trees, and then we'll do the reflection last. And that's kind of the order that we are going to go in, because we're kind of working from light to dark here. So the beach is the lightest section in terms of value. If I were to put this in a black and white filter, you'd see the beach be the lightest by a little bit. Then these trees would be the next lightest, then these trees would be the next lightest, and then the reflection would be about the same value as the trees. So with watercolor, you just try and work from light to dark so that you can layer the dark paint on top of the light. So that's why we're going in that order. So if you're ever looking at a reference photo and wondering what order you need to do those elements in, you can even do it yourself and change the reference photo into black and white, and that'll give you your order. Okay, so let's paint in this beach. This is kind of a warm, I would say a warm gray. So what we're gonna do is start with Payne's gray, which is a very cool gray, because it is similar to blue. And then we're just going to add some brown into that. And you can just add the brown until you reach a sort of mid-tone gray. If you want to be a little fancy, you can add a touch of red into that, just to make it even more warm-toned, or even a little bit of yellow. But if you don't want to deal with that, just gray and brown mixed together will give you a nice sand color. So it's very dark, it's almost black. I'm going to mix in some water, because we still want a fairly dark color, but just not that dark. So something like that. Really, you can't go wrong. Whatever color you want to add into this sand, you can add. It's just kind of a dark gray. Okay. I think that's good. I might add, just tweaking it a little bit, because I'm a perfectionist. I can't leave it alone. There we go. Okay. All right, so we've added some water in there so it's not super dark. And we are going to just paint in this beach section here. Now, if you want to, you can add some logs kind of going out into the water here. That is optional. I'm just going to kind of start with the main beach shape here. So it just kind of goes up underneath these trees here. And then if you're feeling like you want a little extra challenge, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. And I'm just going to kind of put maybe a log that kind of goes out into the water here. You can add some little like sticks sticking out of it, just kind of show what it is. Add another one. And I'll show you how to put a highlight on this at the end if you want to. And this just kind of adds some interest to the beach here. But again, that's optional. Okay. So that's done. What paints do you use? It is Winsor&Newton watercolor paints. Okay, so once you're done with the beach section, we are going to recreate that dark green that we were just using over here on this section. So just go ahead and mix some more of that if you are out. So again, that was green, blue, and brown mixed together. And then you're going to mix basically that same colors, just a slightly different ratio, just more green than blue and brown. And that will give you a slightly lighter color. So still add a little bit of blue and brown, but just more green in this proportion. So I'll show you that too. So that's the lighter green, such as it is. And here's the darker green. So you can see just like a small difference in value there. But one of them's a little lighter. Okay. So when you're ready, start with that lighter green. You can even add a little bit of yellow to it if you want, just to lighten it up a little bit more. And we're just going to create two kind of fluffy, these are deciduous trees, inside this larger tree section. So I'm going to start here and just kind of using circular motions with my brush, create the top of a lighter green tree. Bring that down. The highlights are on the left and top of these trees. So you can add kind of little bushes in here, but we're going to leave the left and bottom side for a shadow. If this is making sense, I'll show you the reference photo in a second so that what I'm talking about will make a little bit more sense. I'm going to add one more tree here. Bring that all the way down to the beach. Okay. Does your swatch paper need to be the same as the paper you're painting on? Nope, it can be whatever paper. I would recommend it being watercolor paper because it will be slightly different on just like printer paper or something like that, but I just use scraps of watercolor paper and the brand does not have to match. Okay, so in this reference photo, if you can see here, we've got these lighter trees in here, so we've just painted kind of the tops, and I painted this little lighter section in here, painted the tops, and then we're going to fill in the rest of it with a shadow color. I'm not sure how well that's showing up on camera, but hopefully you can kind of see my point. Okay, so then with your darker green, you can just take this and again, still using circular motions and just kind of little dots and dashes, you can fill in the shadows of these trees here. And as you get to the bottom here, it's good to kind of create a little bit of texture and not just a straight line across on the beach there. So I'm just kind of dotting a little bit of texture down here as the trees meet the beach. Okay. Yep, these are uploaded to my YouTube channel later. All right. So now it's time to move on to the other trees that are kind of in the background here. So I'm just going to mix up even more of this dark green color. Again, we're just going to go over time by a little bit, so I apologize. And yeah, I'm going to keep using this brush for now, but I will switch to my detail brush. So with that dark green color, now we're going to create the trees around the outside. And let's see if I can just kind of keep the reference photo on here so you can see it. So I'm now just using this dark green. So we're going to create the kind of outline and then add some trees kind of sticking up from this line of trees. So I'm just going to start with a bit of an outline where I'm just kind of matching this line here. Don't worry about what it looks like right now. Painting around these lighter trees. Again, with kind of a circular motion, shaky hand to give it kind of a natural looking tree outline there. And then just fill that in. I'm going to take that up here. So these are all the trees that we can't see through. There's no light kind of coming through these trees. So we can just fill it in with a flat wash. If I need to choose between expensive brushes or expensive paint, which do you feel is priority? I would probably say the paint, just because I think it will give you some significantly better results than the brushes, and you can get some pretty good brushes for not that expensive. I think the paint kind of expense scale correlates with the quality a little bit further than the brushes does, if that makes sense. Okay, so then I'm switching to my detail brush here, and I'm just going to start adding some trees poking out the top of this darker section. So I start with a vertical line for the trunk of my tree. And then I just use my brush and kind of go in a zigzag formation, adding branches, kind of drooping down here. And you can use the reference photo here to inspire you on these branches. But really, kind of the more scraggly looking, the better. If they look perfect, they will not look natural. So just kind of make them scraggly. Have some branches going different directions, kind of overlapping each other. They shouldn't all be even. So bring that down and then just kind of melt the tree into the section that we already painted. Okay, so you can add as many trees as you want. You don't have to follow the reference photo here. You don't even have to add these trees if you don't want to. You could just make these like deciduous trees if you want, but I quite like these evergreen trees. So I'm going to add plenty. And then let's have one more kind of sticking up here. Zoom you in too so you can see that a little bit better. How long have you been painting? I've been painting since I was just a young child. I have just always really liked it, but I was not a savant or anything. All of my childhood drawings probably look just like yours. I have just kind of stuck with it and practiced a lot, and being a full-time artist has really helped me like see my own improvement really quickly, just because I'm doing it all the time. And so that's, you know, I can really confidently say that practice helps because I've seen it with myself. These still go up on YouTube? Yep, absolutely. Okay, so at the very edge here, I might just draw like some branches kind of coming in from a mysterious tree kind of off the side of the composition here. The brush size is a 2 round here. Where do you find your inspiration or getting out of artist block? That's a good question. I would say I don't usually have problem finding inspiration. The more problem is finding the motivation sometimes. I have like 20,000 photos on my camera roll, and almost all of them are reference photos or pictures of things that I thought like I should paint that one day. So if I need inspiration, little push, baby. So if I need inspiration, I will just kind of go through my phone and find a reference photo that I feel like painting. I also just kind of end up getting ideas of things that I want to try, or, I follow people on Instagram that have really cool art styles. So sometimes I'll try something different and try and kind of use a technique that they use, or something that they like to kind of paint. I find water to be really inspiring. I've been on a bit of a water kick recently, so I've been painting a lot of water scenes. The artist block part, sometimes I have a series of paintings that really don't turn out well, and that can be hard, that can be discouraging. I really like 15-minute challenges or just timed challenges because it really makes me get out of my perfectionist brain, and I just have to kind of make a painting in 15 minutes. So that really helps. And just sometimes just like taking a break, which is hard to do when it's your livelihood. But, taking a break is helpful too sometimes. Do you get credit if we buy supplies from your Amazon storefront? Yes, I do. It does not cost you any more, but I do get a little commission from anything you buy from the storefront. So that is always super helpful too. I really like how the water turned out this week. Thank you. It's not quite done yet, but it is almost there. Okay, so this is going to be the last tree I add. Don't feel like you need to be done with your trees because we're just going to move on here. Feel like, you can always go back and add more trees. So I just want to make sure we get the last couple of instructions here so that I don't leave you, or I don't keep you here for another like half hour. So let's zoom back out here. We are pretty much there. We're going to add the reflection, of the trees here. So you can see this really dark green here right at the beach. We're going to paint that in, and that'll really help define the beach area here. And we're going to use the same dry brushing technique that we just used before. Is perfectionism a bad thing? Yes and no. I think it's a good thing when it helps you produce good work, and I think it's a bad thing when it stops you from producing good work. Because it can do both of those things. Okay. So I'm just mixing up that same dark green color that we've been using. I'm just mixing up a little bit more of it. And I'm going to use my smaller brush and, again, take off some of that paint on my paper towel. Hold my brush pretty parallel to the paper and just start scraping. And for this one, let's see, what was I going to say? I completely lost my train of thought there. We want to concentrate this color just kind of in a mirror image of what we've painted just now. So here it can kind of go to the bottom of the paper, of course leaving a few spots of highlights there, and then out here it just kind of dissipates into, whoa, that was not on purpose, just kind of dissipates into the previous watercolor. And we do want this color to be pretty dark, so I might go over this a couple times, especially here right near the beach. And then you can just kind of fade that out into what you've painted already. Do you use other mediums or only watercolor? Yeah, I do use other mediums. I use oil paint and gouache. I have used acrylic before, but it's just not my favorite. So I kind of cycle through watercolor, oil, and gouache, just kind of as needed. Different reference photos kind of lend themselves to different mediums. And so I will kind of get inspired by a reference photo first, and then I'll kind of determine what medium it's going to look best with. And that's what will determine what I use to paint that painting. Here I'm just using the very tip of my brush to get just some really small, very thin, very demure ripples. What's the scariest thing about watercolors? I don't know. I don't really find it scary. You just really can't fix very many mistakes. And that can be scary for some people. I just kind of, it's more frustrating for me than scary. Yeah. Will you do a live like this again? I would love to join next time. Yep. I do these every other week. So the next one will be in 2 weekends. And I would love for you to join us. I've been going over my watercolors with gouache for highlights, and I really like the effect. Yes, absolutely. I love adding gouache highlights to my watercolors. I think that's a really good look. Okay, so we are mostly done. I do want to kind of give you a couple of things that you can use to sort of elevate the painting, just a couple little details. The first one is going to be adding a little bit more detail to the beach section here. So I have my beach color still in my palette, and I'm just going to use that same color, and I'm going to add a few little shadows to the kind of beach logs that we had sitting here. And you can just even add some little rocks and maybe a little bit of a shadow underneath the trees here. So it's the same color. It won't be super harsh or noticeable. It's just going to add a little bit of texture to the beach area here. Okay. And then if you want to add a highlight to the beach section, which you could do for you can see there's like some logs kind of sitting up here. We didn't really include very many of these just because it's just too much to, you know, in the big painting, it's just too much to kind of do that. But if you want to include a little bit of that, or just kind of a hint of it, what you're going to do is take a clean, damp brush and pick a spot where you want to highlight and just scrub your brush there for a couple seconds and then dab it with a paper towel. And when you do that, you'll end up with a little bit of a highlight. You're scrubbing the paint off of the paper, and then you end up with a little bit of a highlight. So if I want to do that like right here, I'm just scrubbing for a few seconds and then quickly dabbing with a paper towel. And you can see that gives you a little highlight there. So maybe we've got some logs kind of going up, you know, into the water there. Maybe we have one like on the beach here that we want to pick out. And the longer you scrub, the more harsh the highlight's going to be. So if you want a less harsh highlight, then don't scrub for quite as long. And if you mess up and you have like too harsh of a highlight, just fill it in with a little bit of paint. What kind of paint are you using? This is watercolor paint. So maybe I want a couple little highlights around here. You can really overdo it on the highlights, so be mindful of how many highlights you're adding. And just a few will kind of increase the texture there and just kind of make everything look a little more realistic. Okay. The last thing I do want to mention is here in these trees, they look a little bit blocky, like the shapes are quite large and it doesn't look necessarily quite like trees. And so if you'd like to kind of blend everything together, just take a damp brush and just kind of blend the line between the light green and the dark green. And this will just make it look a little bit more like natural trees. We're not dabbing the paint away now. This is the same way that you add highlight, but if you don't dab it away, it'll just kind of re-dry in the new spot. So I'm just kind of scrubbing, and you'll end up with a few highlights, but it'll more just kind of look blended in there a little bit better. So this is optional. I just like it for situations like this where it's just not like these trees shouldn't stand out very much. Where is that picture taken? It was taken at Lake Crescent, which is in Olympic National Park. Very beautiful spot. I was just there with my family last weekend. So wasted no time getting the reference photo onto the paint sip. Would you do the video where you're painting with oil paints? Probably not in like a paint and sip setting like this, just because oil paints take so much longer. Like you just can't do a painting in an hour because it doesn't dry in an hour. So I have some tutorials on my YouTube channel with oil paint. I have some on my TikTok. So if you want some tutorials and stuff, they're available in my social media. I just won't do a paint and sip with them. Okay, and then you can also just kind of go back with that lighter green if you want to. If you end up with like too harsh of a blend here, just go back to that green and you can blend it out a little bit. So you can really just kind of keep going back and forth. Try not to overwork it too much, but there are just these little things that you can do that will just kind of increase the realism and you know, just help everything look a little bit more natural. So once that dries, it looks a little funky right now because it's still wet, but once it dries, it'll look a little bit more like blended into the landscape, if that makes sense. I miss the clouds. I understand. It is, this tutorial, has been recorded, so it'll be uploaded to my YouTube channel a little bit later today. All right, so I think that is pretty much the painting. So again, if you did not finish your trees, you can always go back and keep working on those trees and, you know, add a little bit more detail to the beach if you want to. All of that is stuff that you can do. I'm going to go ahead and sign my painting, probably down here with some watercolor. I do recommend signing your paintings and putting the date on them so that you can see when you did them. There we go. And then as promised, I will tell you how to remove them from the watercolor block. So you can see that the paper has warped a little bit. It's kind of moved away from the other pages of the watercolor block. So I just use that and I slide my palette knife in there. And then I just use that to carefully break the glue along the bottom. And then I do the same thing on the top. You can use a butter knife. You don't have to use a palette knife. Just something that'll slide in between there will be fine. There we go. So there's our finished painting. So again, I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to do my plugs one more time just so that you can understand how to support me if you choose to. Again, my name is Hannah. Thank you for joining me today. If you'd like to support me, that is always super, super appreciated. My livelihood depends on lovely people like you supporting me, so that is always very much appreciated. If you click on the link tree in my bio, you'll find these 5 symbols at the very top of that link tree. The first one is the YouTube symbol. It'll take you right to my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to check out this paint and sip, it'll be uploaded later today. All of the previous ones are uploaded there as well. My PayPal is linked in there too. That's the second symbol. If you'd like to leave me a tip or a gift for today's session, that is super, super appreciated. And you can do that via PayPal. That'll take you right to it. If you need to email me, that's my email, TikTok, Instagram, if you want my social media pages. If you scroll down a little bit in that link tree, you'll find the first link is my watercolor book. So again, Watercolor Wanderlust came out in April of this year. This is 24 landscape lessons, just like this paint and sip was. So if you want to work through some landscape lessons, I wrote this whole thing so it sounds like me, and you can just kind of work through it at your own pace. So make sure you check that out. That'll be the first link in the link tree. The second link in the link tree will be my Etsy shop. So if you want to check out the paintings, the postcards, the prints, the bookmarks, all of that stuff that I sell, including this print, which I just finished. I'm super proud of this one. It's kind of water underneath rocks underneath water. You can check that out in the Etsy shop. Again, super appreciated. I love sending my artwork out to new homes. And then my Patreon is in there. If you'd like to support me on a monthly basis, you'll get an extra tutorial. And let's see what else. My art supply recommendations are in there too with my Amazon storefront. And I think that is all that I'm going to mention for now. If you'd like to kind of do a little art gallery for all of our paintings, if you painted along with me today, what you can do is post your painting on Instagram on your story and tag me, and I will repost everybody's stories who tags me, and we'll have a little art gallery in my Instagram story. Same handle as TikTok. Again, you can find it in my link tree or just search the same handle as TikTok on Instagram. If you don't feel comfortable publishing your painting publicly, you can just DM it to me. I don't respond to all of my DMs because I get too many, but I do always look at them. So if I don't respond, don't feel like I didn't see it. I just, have to be offline sometimes. So I think that is all. Again, if you'd like to support me, check out the link tree. If you can't support me monetarily yet, just, liking my stuff, commenting, help me with the algorithm. All of that is super, super helpful. So thank you for any way you choose to support me. Thank you for being here.